Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. In this new 4-week series called Broken, Jeremy talks about how each one of us carries within ourselves a brokenness. God, through Christ, makes the broken whole. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit our website at www.crosswindchurch.net or email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
You guys have a Bible. I hope you do. Go ahead and grab it. We're going to be in the Gospel of Luke, which is the Matthew, Mark, Luke, the third book in the New Testament, and we're going to be in chapter 7 there today. If you don't have a Bible with you today, or on the app, or whatever it is, we're going to put all the words up on the screen so you can follow along with us as we kind of walk through a passage of Scripture today. My former church office was in a part of the church that had been kind of added on to the original part of the church. Maybe you've been a part of buildings like that where they just kind of add on a little bit. And so what that meant was that one of the walls in the hallway of this church was used formerly an exterior wall of the building. You with me? I know it's kind of hard to explain. And so it was actually rock, like stone. In fact, the church was originally known as like the Rock Church. And so it had this stone wall. And for some, that would have been cool and hip and all that. I didn't really like it, but it was what it was. And you couldn't really do much with it because it was stone, right? It was about all you could do with it. And I can remember one particular Tuesday was busy. Tuesdays were always busy for me, and they still kind of are, because Tuesday was staff meeting day. So I had all of my staff full-time and part-time. They were there at the church. They were kind of milling around, getting ready for the meeting, and I had already worked up the agendas and all those things, and I was ready to go. You know me. I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and that was kind of normally what happens. And Tuesday's kind of busy, and we're trying to wrap up loose ends so we can have this meeting. And so it was time to go, and what I'd done is I'd taken, I had a big desk calendar, because that's the way I used to do things. Because I'm old, and I had this big calendar, and I would write these on. I would always take it to the staff meeting so that we could write down stuff and we knew what was going on the calendar. And I had just made this decision a few weeks earlier that I was going to start using my iPad more. I've been blessed with this technology, right? And so I was like, I can keep my calendar on it, I can check email on it, I can look up stuff on the web with it, and I can take notes on it. And I had downloaded a bunch of apps and talked about styluses, and this is just what I'm going to do. So I was kind of in that transition. And so I'm leaving to go to staff meeting. I've got the calendar in my hand, and on top of it, I've got all the agendas that I'm going to pass out to my staff when I get to the meeting. And I've got the iPad sitting on top of it, and I'm holding in my left hand a drink because, you know, you just got to have some sweet tea sometimes. And I'm walking down the hallway like a server at a restaurant, kind of balancing it. That's kind of how I go. And I step out into this hallway, and something in my right hand with the calendar and all of the agendas and the iPad, the weight begins to shift just a little bit. It starts to slide. Now this is where like a normal person that's not crazy would have been like, I should probably put my tea down and fix this. But no, I try to do like some maneuver, like I'm going to save it, and just kind of keep right on going to the meeting. That was the move that I made, which is also a dance move. You should know that. And so anyway, what I do is I make it worse. And I'm watching the iPad, this $500 piece of equipment that it has everything in my life on it, and it starts to slide now faster to the edge. And for just a split second, there's that moment where you realize this is going to be bad. And it slides off of the calendar into space. And what happens at that moment, if you've ever been there, is that time just slows down. Everything goes into slow motion. And I don't know what I said at that moment, but it was probably something like, yo, something like that, right? It slides off of my calendar and lands on the plush carpet. And I thought, that couldn't be any better. Just this big puffy carpet, there's a pad underneath it, that's great. And I thought, oh, the day has been saved. And then it bounces and turns, and the upper left-hand corner of it ran right into that rock wall. And my iPad fell to the ground. Now there's that moment that I have, maybe you've had it, where you kind of go, it'll be okay. Everything will be fine. This is a great piece of equipment. They designed these things this way. Everything will be all right. And I put my calendar down, and I pick up the iPad gingerly, and I open up the cover, and there it is. In the upper left-hand corner, the shattered bit of glass and the crack that runs all the way down in a nice little arc all the way over to the side. Now, if that's ever happened to you, there's like stages of grief that you go through. I don't know what order they went in. They all happened so fast. But the first thing was just that gut feeling where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that it's broke, And then you get mad. Because then I was like, you know what, Dad, blame it, Apple. You make a product that everybody wants to have, and I just have to have to make it out of glass. How stupid is that? This is really Apple's fault. If we kind of just want to break it down to who deserves the blame. And then there's that reality thing, I'm talking about, where you realize I'm going to have to call my wife. Right? I'm going to have to explain what's going on. And then there's the fear of, oh goodness, will it ever be useful again? Will it still work? Or is it just completely gone? And then there's that just utter disgust that kind of sits right here in my gut. And it's that disgust of, you know what? I'm going to have to use a broken piece of equipment. And every time I want to show somebody an email, every time I want to show somebody a picture, every time I want to show somebody like a video that I looked up on YouTube of like kids doing something cute, like every time I look at it, I'm going to have to explain. It's broken. Here's why it's broken. And it's just too costly to replace and too difficult to repair. I wonder if maybe you've experienced something like that. Maybe it's something that was really visible, that people knew that you had, or that was maybe on display in your house and it broke, like maybe a picture frame, maybe a wedding picture, maybe, or whatever, and it's up there, and then the kids get rambunctious, or you get in a pillow fight or something like that. Am I the only one that has pillow fights at your house? Okay, anyway, and the picture knocks off, and then smash, the glass shatters, and you go, oh no, and I have to explain that. Or maybe it was a phone, or an iPad, or a mirror, 7 years of bad luck for that, right? Or someone else, maybe it was a car. Like you're driving the car and then somebody comes out and you pull in front and there's an accident, it's your fault, it's their fault, it really doesn't matter, but your car is never going to be the same again. It is broken and there's no hiding it because of that it's broken. Maybe you understand those stages of grief that I was describing just a minute ago. If you see something that was of value to you that now has been destroyed or has been broken. You see, the truth of the matter is that you carry a brokenness with you, and I carry a brokenness that's with me that goes much deeper and is much more painful than any like item that I described could be. See, the book of Genesis in the Bible, which is the very first one, it tells us a story about Adam and Eve and about how they were tempted and how they sinned. And when they sinned, sin entered into the world and the world was broken. Everything was broken from that point in time. Adam and Eve, their relationship with God was broken. Adam and Eve, their relationship with each other was broken. Their relationship with the world was broken. You know the thing that we learn when we study the Bible? When we study the Bible, we find out that brokenness from that very first sin, it was passed on to their children, and passed on to their children, and passed on to their children. And today, you carry the burden of that brokenness, and I carry the burden of that brokenness. You see, sin causes brokenness. We all know what that's like, don't we? We know what it's like to carry that kind of brokenness around. Maybe it's decisions that have been made for you or decisions that were made by you, but it's that brokenness that leads to the horrible financial pits that we find ourselves in a lot of times, and the back-breaking debt that we carry with us. It's that brokenness that leads to relationships that are broken, and the first marriage that failed, and the second marriage that failed, and the third marriage that failed. And it's that brokenness that leads us to rebel away from our parents and rebel away from our children. And it's that brokenness that causes the addiction and the hurt and the pain and the suffering and the death. We all know what that brokenness is like to carry. No. See, the problem is that for some of us, that brokenness is not able to be hidden. For some of us, that brokenness is obvious, right? That brokenness was lifestyle decisions. That brokenness was something that you bear on your person or in the way that you present yourself. Everyone is able to see it. Some of you, that brokenness is a little bit more easily concealed, but we all carry that brokenness with us. So for the next few weeks, what we're going to kind of do is kind of take an uncomfortable journey, probably, into the world of brokenness. and we're going to take a look at our own hearts, and we're going to take a look at the hearts of others, and we're going to see what Jesus has to say about brokenness. We're, in fact, going to kind of look at the elephant that's in the room, every room that you've ever been in. And that is our brokenness. Maybe even you've had the question in your brokenness. Same question I had about my iPad. Will I ever be useful again? Will God ever be able to use me? In spite of what I've done and where I've been, in spite of the fact that I'm broken, I'm damaged goods. And so today I want to take a look at a passage of Scripture where Jesus is going to give us feedback in our minds. Just kidding. I want to look at a passage of Scripture where Jesus is going to address our brokenness and what that means. Let's take a look at Luke chapter 7. And for those of you that are reading Crosswind, we're going to read a little bit, talk a little bit, read a little bit, talk a little bit. Chapter 7 of the Gospel of Luke, beginning in verse 36. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. Now, we kind of have to talk about a couple things here before we kind of go any farther. First of all, a Pharisee is a group of people, or the Pharisees were a group of people in first century Judaism in the ancient Near East that were kind of what I call the religious watchdogs. They were the ones that made sure they understood what the law was, they made sure that they kept what the law was, and they made sure that everyone else that was Jewish knew what the law was and kept what the law was. Not only the 600 some odd laws that God had given to Moses for the Jewish people, but also the oral traditions and all the laws that were in place to make sure that the laws weren't broken. They made sure that all of these laws and all these regulations were followed. So they were really popular people in their day. That's sarcasm. They weren't, right? They were incredibly wealthy a lot of times. They had a lot of power. They had a lot of prestige. They were the guys that were looking for everybody to fail and tell them how bad of a failure they were. Now, it said Jesus was invited to his house to go and eat. Now, there's something that's special that the Jews understood about table fellowship, about sharing a meal with somebody. You see, for them, it was incredibly intimate of a gathering. In fact, I don't think you could have gotten much more intimate than sharing a meal with someone. In fact, a lot of times we see Jesus sharing a meal with some undesirables, right? The tax collectors, the sinners, the prostitutes. Those are the people that Jesus ate with. He also ate with the Pharisees. You have proof of it right here. Okay? So Jesus is invited to this meal, and it's this intimate gathering. It's something that we kind of try to tap into in our home groups. For those of you that are involved in a home group, one of the reasons why we eat is because we just know that something special happens when you sit around a table and you have food with somebody. There's just something special about it. Okay? So, this is a gathering where Jesus, who would have been incredibly popular, who was the new kid on the block, an up-and-coming teacher that had been healing people and saying some things that upset the religious elite, he had gathered quite a following. He was now going to this Pharisee, this law-keeper's kind of house to eat, and it would have been the talk of the town. It would have been the social event of the day or the week, maybe even the month in this little town. And as a result, people would have come from all over to be a part of what was going on in this Pharisee named Simon's house. Now, this is where the culture in the first century breaks from ours just a little bit. See, if I invite you over to my home and we have a meal, you come in and we shut the door, and we're probably not going to let anybody just come into the house. But in this day and age, the doors would have been kept open to the house. The windows would have been kept open to the house. The public would have been invited to come and to see this meal. Only the select few would have been able to sit around the table and eat. But other people would have been allowed to come from the community and stand along the walls and sit along the walls and look in the doors and hear the conversation that was kind of going on at the table. That's the scene for this amazing, amazing story. Now look what happens next. Verse 37. Excuse me. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. Now, the tradition, if you were to have studied this for a while, the tradition holds that this woman that was one of these onlookers was a prostitute. The Bible doesn't kind of say that, but I think the Bible gives us enough clues that we can kind of make that decision. The clue that it gives us is it says that this woman who had lived a sinful lifestyle, that little phrase that we translate live a sinful lifestyle in the NIV, it is a phrase from the Greek that literally means she had devoted her life to sin. Wrap your head around that for just a minute. She had devoted her life to sin. It meant that her daily lifestyle decisions, Her daily activities was sinful, and she was willful about it. She knew it was sin, and she did it anyway. Okay? So a lot of people think that, with some other contextual clues, make her a prostitute. Now, I got to thinking about that, and I got to thinking about what that might look like today. And so the only way I can describe what was going on in the Pharisee's house is this. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you invite your pastor over to your house for dinner. And then I thought, maybe not me, because I'm not like most pastors. So maybe you invite, like, you know, a pastor that you know from another church or whatever to your house for dinner, and he comes in with his suit and his pompadour haircut. Just picture that, okay? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. And he comes over to your house for dinner. Not there's anything wrong with pompadour haircuts, okay? But he goes to your house for dinner, and as you're sitting there getting ready to eat dinner, there's a knock at the door. And you get up and you go and you open the door, and there on the other side of the door is your crazy uncle that you're ashamed of. Right? Now, he may have all kinds of problems. You can just fill in what we view as big sin here, right? Because sometimes we do that. We make big sin and little sins. Like, pick your big sin, make whatever that is. So you can pick, I'll just name a few. He's the drunk crazy uncle. He's the drugged out crazy uncle. He's the gay crazy uncle. He's the whatever you think of as big sin crazy uncle. You with me? And he shows up, he's like, hey, I remember there's going to be a party. And then he comes in and he just makes this big ordeal of it. You tracking with me? That would be how it would be to have this prostitute walk into this room with the Pharisee and Jesus. Look what happens next, because it's about to get even weirder. Verse 38. As she stood behind him, because that was the only place she could go, she couldn't pull up to the table. She was behind Jesus. She stood behind him at his feet, weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. So now it's not just crazy, sinful uncle that's there. Now he or she is making a scene. She's crying, sobbing uncontrollably. She's got this jar of perfume that she probably wore around her neck, as is common for the Jewish ladies to do. She breaks it and starts pouring it on his feet, and she's crying so much, big crocodile tears, that they're wetting his feet. And she takes her hair. This is a clue for those of us that want to know how we know she's a prostitute. She takes her hair. It was very uncommon and very unsocially acceptable for Jewish women to have their hair down in public. And in some circles, that literally was a sign of being a prostitute, that you kept your hair down. So she takes her hair that's down and she's wiping Jesus' feet while she's crying and pouring perfume on them, making a scene. Now, we all know those people, don't we? Those people that just don't understand social cues. Like somewhere along the line, like their mama didn't teach them how you're supposed to act in public or something like that. And so they're the ones that carry on the conversation way too long, way after it should be, way on after it's been polite. They're the ones that want to talk to you, but they want to get right up in your bubble. They want to get right up and just be a close talker right up in your face. Or they're the ones that always want to touch you or hug you or rub on your back, when you're not supposed to. Those sorts of things, they're going to give you permission, but they're breaking all these kind of social cues. What this Bible verse is telling us is that this woman that is there with Jesus is breaking every social cue. She's invaded his bubble. She's invaded his space. She's a sinner. We know she's a sinner. There's no denying she's a sinner. She's causing a scene, and it is out of control. I can only imagine how Simon would have felt, the Pharisee. Because I can only imagine how I would have felt in that same situation. Right? Now look what happens to Simon here as he says this. He's doing all this thing, and in verse 39 it says, when the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Now there's a couple of things that I want to point out here. First of all, Simon's saying this kind of to himself, maybe under his breath, maybe it's something Jesus is able to read his mind. We're not exactly told what is going on. But his point is this: if this man was a prophet, and then you can put in parentheses here, and he clearly isn't. Because if he were a prophet, he would know who she was, he would know what she's done, and he would send her away. Because there's this idea, isn't there, that if somebody is has a relationship with God, if somebody's a prophet, if somebody's a pastor, if somebody's a Christian, well, then they're just not going to associate with people that do things that are just questionable like this. I can remember the last county we lived in was a dry county in Alabama. What that meant was they didn't serve or sell alcohol of any kind anywhere in that county. It was a dry county. And the town that we lived in was 5 miles from the next county, however. So, all people had to do to buy that was to drive to the next county to get that. And there was a real famous store right across the line. I say famous because for years and years and years, it was the largest seller of Budweiser products in the state of Alabama. It was called Wayne's Package Store. It's still there to this day. And it was right there just across the county line in a wet county, so you could drive there and go get it. Now, Wayne's was not just a package store, because that's not how they do things in Warrior, Alabama. It was like a package store / donut shop / gas station / convenience store. That was kind of all it was there. So you could go get gas there, and they sold, you ready for this, Krispy Kreme donuts in Wayne's, like little gas station part. It was divided. They had the liquor store on one side, and they had the convenience store on the other, and there was a wall down the middle, and so you could go get your donuts and all that kind of stuff. That was just kind of the way that it was. And so I can remember having a conversation with a gentleman who didn't even attend our church, and we were talking about Wayne's there right across the county line. And his statement to me was so funny. He was like, Jeremy, I just don't think that someone like you shouldn't even be get gas there. You shouldn't be even seen there. It's such a bad place. My thought was, but they sell Krispy Kreme donuts. But there's this idea, isn't there, that Christians, that pastors, that prophets in this day and age, there's certain people we shouldn't associate with. As if I went into that store somehow by osmosis, the liquor would just get into my system. It would just like jump over on me. And so they're like, you can't do that. And I thought, man, that's the exact same thing that's going on here. The Pharisees looking at Jesus and he's going, she's a sinner, she's a prostitute. There's all kinds of reasons why he shouldn't be around her. And if he knew who she was, he certainly would send her away. Now, the Christians, we don't ever think like that, do we? We don't ever see somebody whose brokenness is so obvious, whose sinfulness is so obvious, and go, ooh, I just don't want to be around them. Or, oh man, I want them to go to church, and I want them to know Jesus. I just want them, A, to become like us before they do it, or B, to find Jesus over there somewhere. Right? We're never guilty of the same thing that Simon's doing right here. If we knew who they were, if we knew what they'd done, he surely would send her away. And then Jesus does what only Jesus can do. He tells a story. Let's pick up in verse 40. And Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which will love him more? Simon replied, I suppose the one who has the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. Let's put this in context, because I don't know what a denarii is unless I look it up. And so I did. A denarius is about 1 day's wages for like a common laborer. And so what I just did is I said, if a denarius is a common laborer's day wage, like let's just take $10 an hour or $7 an hour, we'll do $10 an hour because the math is easy. $10 an hour and 8 hours a day, that's $80 a day. For about 50 of those days, it would end up being about $4,000. That's about how much that money is. 50 denarii, about $4,000 in today's time. 500 denarii, about $40,000. So you see that both of these people owed money to a money lender. One owed him not so much. We might be able to work off that $4,000. That $40,000 is a little bit more money. That might be a little bit harder to work off, but nonetheless, both of them could eventually be paid if we're given enough time. But Jesus makes this cool statement that I don't want us to blow past. He says, neither one could pay back the debt. What that means is both had incurred a debt that they couldn't repay. One of the debts was small, one of the debts was large. But for those individuals, it doesn't matter. $4,000, $40,000, might as well have been $40 million. They couldn't pay it back. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the potential. They had incurred a debt they couldn't pay back. And so the moneylender, he just says, you know what? Forget about it. You don't owe me anything. He closes the books. Now, I know a couple bankers, Tommy Gurley, they would never do that, right? But never, they're always going to get their money. You know what I'm saying? Okay, but this money lender goes, you know what? You can't pay back the debt. I'm going to forgive the debt. And the question is, who would be more happy? Who would be more celebratory? Who would love that person more? And Simon just goes, well, that makes more sense. The one that has been forgiven the bigger debt. Now, you see, Jesus is telling a story, but what he's really doing is talking about Simon and this woman. He's talking about this prostitute and this man. And his point is the same. You see, Simon, you look at her and her brokenness and her sinfulness, and it's obvious. She can't hide it. Everyone knows what she is. Everybody knows what she does. Everybody knows where she's been, right? And you can't deny the brokenness that she carries with her every day. But Simon, I want you to understand something. You also carry a brokenness. You also have a sin problem. You also have done something, and maybe it's not as big as the world defines big. Maybe it doesn't have as many repercussions as she has. Maybe it's not as obvious. Maybe you're able to conceal it just a little bit better. But Simon, here's the point. You both have a debt you can't pay. She's here weeping and happy and excited and serving Jesus. Why? Because she recognizes what she's been forgiven. She recognizes what Jesus has done on her behalf. She recognizes that God has looked past her brokenness and saw her potential. And she's overcome with emotion because of it. Simon, on the other hand, because his debt was smaller, he had to assume that God was getting a good deal with him. I mean, Simon could have run through his list that we run through, right? I don't smoke or drink or cuss or chew or hang around with girls that do. Like, man, I got that linked. I did that. Man, God, you're getting a good deal with me. I'm observing the law, trying to do what's right. And Jesus' response is, Simon, you understand. You're just as broken as her. You need forgiveness just as much. But because you haven't recognized it, you can't be thankful for it. Now, he's going to go on, and he's going to point out some social breaches of etiquette here. The air keeps turning my page. Okay. He says this. Verse 44. Then he turned towards the woman and said to Simon. Now we have to stop here, because this is one of those most amazing statements that Jesus is going to make. In fact, this is one of those things that I'm 38 years old, and I've read the Bible a good portion of my life, and God put this here for the first time this week as I was studying this. I promise this. You ready? So what happens is Jesus, we get this cue from Luke, who's telling the story, that Jesus, as he tells this story to Simon, and as he's talking about this woman and this Pharisee, it says he turns to the woman, but he talks to Simon. You with me? And look what he says. This will blow your mind. You ready? Look what he says. Do you see this woman? Now let me tell you why that's such a big statement. Let me tell you why it's wrecked me this week. Simon didn't see the woman. He saw her sin. Simon didn't see the person. He saw her brokenness. Simon was unable to see her because he was too busy looking at her circumstances. See, let me explain. We live in a world that loves labels. We do. I love labels. I have a label maker in my desk drawer. Right? I love labels. And what we like to do is we like to look at people and we like to just label them. And so we have all kinds of labels and all kinds of boxes we put people in, don't we? Let's talk about you. You're black. You're white. You're Latino, you're Asian, you're a man, you're a woman, you're a conservative, you're a liberal, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. We can keep going, right? You're gay, you're straight, you're rich, you're poor, you're Baptist, you're Methodist. We can just keep going with all the labels and all the boxes that we put on people. And you're talking to a guy that likes labels. Here's the problem. The problem is that somewhere along the line, we start seeing labels and we stop seeing people. And the truth of the matter is that every person you look at, every person you lock eyes with, no matter what their label is, Christian, atheist, no matter what their label is, every person you lock eyes with is someone that is made in the image of God. And because of that, they have immeasurable worth, and they are loved in an immeasurable way by an immeasurably large God. And because they have that value and that worth, they also should have that value and that worth to us. The problem with Simon was not that he recognized her sin. Jesus is going to tell us in just a minute, she has many sins that need forgiveness. The problem with Simon is that all he could see was her sin. He didn't see her anymore. And I love the fact that Jesus pauses, looks at her, says to Simon, do you see this woman? I wonder how many people we look at every day and we don't see them. We see a lady. How many people we look at every day and we don't see their heart, and we don't see their life, and we don't see if they matter to God. We just see what box we want to put them in. Maybe you're the person that people have been seeing your lady. You've carried it around for so long, and that's all people view you as, that you don't even know if they know who you are anymore. All they see is divorcee. All they see is addict. All they see is problem, sin. But Jesus challenges Simon and challenges us to look past the brokenness and see the potential in Christ. Because that's what Jesus is able to do right here. He goes on. Look at the second half of verse 44. He says, you see this woman, I came to your house, and you did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped me with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. And you did not pour oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Her acts that broke these social norms were simply an act of worship, of celebration for what God has done for her. When Jesus looked past her brokenness, saw the potential in Christ. Sometimes that's hard to do, isn't it? Sometimes it's hard to look past people's brokenness. Sometimes it's hard for others to look past ours. You all know that I have this weird blood disease, chronic granulomatous disease, and I've had sicknesses and illnesses my entire life, and I was adding up surgeries that I've had the other day, and I don't know how many, it's a dozen or more, major surgeries that I have. And on my belly right here, I have a scar from an operation that I had when I was 18 months old. I had abscesses, infections on my liver, and they had to go in and remove those infections when I was just a baby. And then my body rejected stitches, and so this had to heal as an open wound. And so you can imagine this scar on my belly is really, really, really gross. It just is. And I can tell you, I try to be cautious with it because I don't want people to be uncomfortable. For a long time, I was like really self-conscious about it and didn't want people to see it and that sort of stuff. And now I really don't care. Now I'm more doing it because I don't want other people to be uncomfortable or awkward. Because if we were to go swimming and I were to take my shirt off in front of you, that would be all you could see. Because it's just there, right? And you would be like, whoa, hey, what happened? And then I'll tell you some story about a knife fight or a shark attack or something like that. But seriously, the thing is that I know what it's like to be at the beach and take my shirt off and have people not see me and see that scar. I know what it's like to go to the pool and take the shirt off and have people not see me and see that scar. This prostitute knew what it was like to have her scars just put out in front of everybody else and have people not see her, but in fact see her scars. One of the churches I worked at, I had a young man that was under my care. He was in my area of ministry. His name was Jamie. And Jamie was one of those individuals whose life bore the scars of his past decisions and the decisions made by others. He had been abused, and He had been beaten up a number of times, and he had abused drugs and alcohol, and he had been in all kinds of systems and all kinds of programs. And through one of the many encounters that he had that was negative, one of his eyes had kind of turned outward and was just a little bit, I don't even know if he was able to see through it, but it definitely looked bizarre and looked weird. And he didn't always follow all of the right social cues and didn't always know the right things to say. And if you were to walk down the street and you would see Jamie walking towards you, you would just naturally and instinctively go, man, that was a guy like a guy that's been through the ringer, and I'm going to cross over to the other side so that I don't have to, deal with that. His past, his brokenness was able to be seen by everyone. There was no hiding it. The thing was, if you paused, if you were willing to pause and just have a conversation, go and talk to him and hear his story, you would hear that, yes, he's been through a lot of garbage. Yes, he still struggles with some garbage. But here's a young man that loves Jesus and is on fire for Jesus and just wants to know Jesus more. One of the things that I learned, one of the many things I learned from Jamie is the little statement that everybody has a story. No matter how they look, no matter what they've been through, no matter what the past, everybody has a story. Everybody needs Jesus, including you, including me. As we begin this story, we begin this series together, I wonder if you might just be willing to just come to grips with that brokenness that you carry. See, we all carry it. For some of us, that brokenness is a little bit more obvious. For some of you, your body bears the scars, literally, of your brokenness. For others, that brokenness is a relationship that didn't end the way it was supposed to end, or a child that isn't doing what that child was supposed to do, or an addiction that's gotten out of control, and you can't hide it any longer. For some of you, that brokenness is something that's easy. For some of you, that brokenness is something that you can conceal. That brokenness is something that only you and maybe your spouse or you alone know about. But either way, whether it's obvious or whether it's easily concealed, we all carry a brokenness. And before we can allow God to forgive us, and before we can rejoice in the forgiveness that comes from God, we've got to recognize what it is He's done for us and what it is He brings to us and just exactly how much He's forgiven in us. Because whether it's big or small, we've incurred a debt we cannot pay back. We are all broken. This guy, you, pastor down the street, the deacon at the church down the street, your next door neighbor, the person you buy groceries from, the guy that shot you the finger in traffic the other day, every single one of us carries that brokenness. And today, I wonder if you might just respond as Matt and the team come back up to lead us in one more song. Here's what I want you to do. The song is just Come As You Are. That's the name of the song. And what I want to encourage you to do is this. Today, would you just come to the realization of your brokenness, big or small? Would you be willing to stand and rejoice in celebration for what it is that God has done for you? And give God the praise that He's able to look past your brokenness, see your potential in Christ. He can look past your brokenness, see your potential in Christ. Because everybody has a story. And everybody is broken.